A Blade So Black, A Dream So Dark by L.L. McKinney. This is going to be my review. Spoiler alert, loved it, and it is a crossover between Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Alice in Wonderland. So yes, if you want to find out more about what I thought using the 7 cowrie shell rating system, you should just watch. Hi. It has Hi. Welcome back to ONYX Pages. I have just finished reading, and by just I mean this week I finished reading A Dream So Dark by L.L. McKinney, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. So I received an advanced reader's copy of this from Raincoast Books. So thank you very much, Raincoast Books, for providing me with a copy of this story. So this came out, I believe, in September of 2019, and A Dream So Dark is the sequel to A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. So I think I did not. Lying already. I'm like 2 minutes in, I'm lying to the people. So I had meant to do a review of A Blade So Black, but then 2019 happened. So here we are. So I'm going to talk about both of these books. This is a reimagining of Alice in Wonderland, and I think Alice Through the Looking Glass, or Alice in the Looking Glass. And in it we follow this lovely woman here. Her name is Allison, and she is the Alice. She is a teenager going to school, and her father dies, and right around the time of his death, while she's mourning, she's like walking down an alley, and she runs into this guy who is surprised that she can actually see him, and she encounters these monsters that are supposed to be invisible to humans, and Hatta, who's not actually from that world, is surprised that Allison can actually see him. He knows that there's something special about Allison. So as the story unfolds, we learn that Allison lives in a world like ours, in an urban environment where there's also a gateway to Wonderland. And Wonderland is not the kind of Wonderland that we sort of see in the movies. Wonderland is a place that is, you know, sort of this post-war magical place where there are feuding queens and destructive magical creatures called nightmares, which are these big monsters that try to come into the human world and terrorize humans, and they're made of the fears and the negative feelings of humans. So basically, Allison discovers that she is a dream walker, which means that she has the power to kill nightmares and to fight and to protect the veil between this Wonderland and the human world. And she gets enveloped in Hatta's world, and she starts to learn a little bit more about the politics of Wonderland, about the mythology, about the magic of Wonderland, and also like this feud, right? This feud that happened that is still unresolved. I guess I'm sort of talking about both of the books together. So in book 1, we basically, the villain in book 1 is the Black Knight, and Allison encounters him, and we see whether or not she defeats the Black Knight, and we learn about how Wonderland is organized. There are 4 different gates: west, east, north, and south. She lives near the western gate, and to get into Wonderland you have to go through this pub, and it's cute because inside the pub there are references to Alice in Wonderland. I think the clock is like the Cheshire Cat, and so on. So if you're a fan of Alice in Wonderland, you'll recognize different cute references. The cool thing about this being a reimagining is that Allison is alive in the world, and unlike Alice in Wonderland, where most of the movie takes place in Wonderland, in this this book, you get a very great sense of what Allison's life is like. She lives with her mother in this house. She has a best friend named, her best friend is Courtney, and which is cool because it's, you know, court, which if you know Alice in Wonderland, you know why court means something. But her best friend is this wealthy white girl who's her like ride or die, and she also has a friend named Chess, which, you know, obviously is a reference to Alice in Wonderland. And so the trio get caught up in all of this, even though Allison has to keep her secret identity as a dream walker a secret from her mother and from her friends and from her schoolmates. So at the end of the story, there's this big battle. It's very interesting, and that battle, the aftermath of the battle, is where the second book begins. So what we learn in the second book that I found really interesting, and if you haven't read the first, I won't talk too much about the plot of this because I don't want it to be too much of a spoiler. But really, where the first book spent a lot of time on the human side of things, the second book spends a lot of time in Wonderland. And here we get an increase and an expansion of the cast of characters. We meet dreamwalkers from the different gates and also guardians of those different gates. We get to encounter a mysterious person. We don't know who she is, but she's this evil villain. And we learn more about the relationships between the guardians who were fighting together in this war. I have to say that I know that there are criticisms of this book, and I really should have watched other people's reviews to remind myself of the criticisms, but I actually like both of these books a lot. I really, really enjoyed them. They were fast-paced, they were interesting, they were layered. Allison is very much a young Black girl. It's funny that there are references to her, like Blackness, like references to her hair and her mom wearing a bonnet, and just like her, she's so aware of her identity as a Black girl, and it comes up in these very interesting ways. Like, for example, she's really dirty after a battle, and she's brought to the home of somebody that she can trust, and the person says, you know, just go take a bath and relax, you know, you've been through a lot. So she goes and she takes a bath, and then after she comes out of the bath, she's like, sorry, do y'all have lotion? And I was like, when was the last time I heard a superhero ask for lotion, right? And it's funny because I have been in situations where I'm staying over, as a kid, I would stay over at somebody's house and I'd have a shower, and then I'd be like, y'all don't have lotion? How come we don't have lotion? So just little things like that make it very clear that she is Black. And even though she's a superhero, she's very aware that the real harm that she actually faces is her mother's anger if she doesn't obey her mom, which she doesn't sometimes. So the relationship between Allison and her mom is really, really strong throughout, because both her mom and her recently suffered the death of her father. There's obviously a lot of grief, a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. And there's also like the regular stuff that you would have to deal with if you're a teenager going to school as well. So there's the politics of high school and popularity and crushes and love triangles and just madness. So I really enjoyed both of the books. So I'm gonna just take you really briefly through the 7 Cowrie shells. So in terms of the world building, so world building is obviously the process of constructing an imaginary world. I think that the world building in this is really strong. I think the challenge that an author has when they're doing a retelling or a reimagining of a world that was already built is that they have to stay true to certain principles of the world. So there needs to be, as in any portal fantasy, there needs to be a mechanism for people to move from, you know, this world that we're living in now into this magical realm, and it has to be believable. And at no point did I find myself misunderstanding or questioning the fact that this Wonderland, this version of Wonderland that McKinney created, could actually be. Like, I can totally see a weirdo pub having a back door into another world, or walking through a mirror or something like that. So I found it a lot of fun, even though Wonderland felt a little unfinished. Like it felt very vast and unfinished. I think that is also part of it, because Wonderland, if you remember from Alice in Wonderland, it's very chaotic, strange patchwork of all these different places that don't quite work, right? So she was able to capture the chaos of Wonderland, but also to layer like a really seamless, like, political feuding and boundaries and on top of it to make it make sense. So I appreciated that. What I also liked in the world building is that McKinney actually engages different continents in our world into Wonderland, right? So the keepers of the different gates, west, east, north, and south, are from different ethnicities, and so you actually see the different ways that they culturally engage with Wonderland, which I thought was kind of cool. So you have a character that speaks Japanese, you have a Russian character, you have characters from the US. So I thought that was really good. In terms of like whether the world building in it of itself challenges some of the oppressions that we experience now, or whether it provides an alternative from a speculative fiction perspective, it really didn't do that, right? It was just, you know, an evil villain that wants to take over and we need to vanquish them kind of thing. So anyway, but I would give a full Cowrie shell because the world building was very good. The characters, so by characters I'm thinking about how diverse the characters were, how developed the characters were, what their relationships were like with each other, and whether they were relatable to me, and whether they were the characters I needed to actually see. And I've already spoken about the diversity in terms of ethnicity and race. I'll also talk about diversity in terms of age, diversity in terms of sexual orientation. So in the second book, there are older characters that had a role in the action. And sometimes when you have a fantasy, especially YA fantasy, sometimes the magical characters are young. They're teenagers or in their early 20s. You don't actually see older characters fighting and having an actual role. And in the second book, you actually see the introduction of an older character who actually assists in the battle in a particular way. And I really like that. I like the intergenerational companionship that we saw in the second book. I also thought that McKinney did an excellent job of having an ethnically diverse group of individuals, but putting the main character, a Black female, in front and telling the story from her perspective. So Allison's perspective was the dominant one in this book, even though in the second book, and maybe even in the first, we hear the story from the perspective of Hatta, who is an older, like hundreds of years older character who is obviously not a Black young woman. But I was okay with that. Also, Allison is very aware of herself sexually and romantically. She's aware of herself in terms of her politics of race and of violence and of being a young woman growing up in an urban environment. And so she takes that view of the world into Wonderland, which allows the reader to perceive Wonderland through her lens, which is very different from the lens of the blonde, blue-eyed young Alice in Wonderland that I experienced when I watched like the cartoon version of Alice in Wonderland when I was a child, which was created in 1951. So it was really nice to encounter Wonderland through her perspective. So I think that the characters, for the most part, the main characters were quite developed, but I do have a beef about some of the secondary characters. Of course, we know that secondary characters are really there to round out the story, and you might not get the depth of analysis and the depth of development in those characters as you would from the main character. But the challenging part is that when your secondary characters come from marginalized groups and they're not as developed, it's very easy for them to drop into certain tropes. So for example, Tweedledum and Tweedledee are from Alice in Wonderland, and here they're Russian twins, and we don't learn a lot about them and their lives. We also have a character who is a Japanese young woman. We don't really learn that much about her life, and at one point in the story, I can't give a spoiler, but she kind of just gets like dropped from the plot in a way that was unfortunate because I wanted to learn more about her. So while there was diversity, I didn't really get enough interaction from the characters' perspective for that to fully have been, you know, as beneficial as it could have been to the plot. I think the most important relationship that was highlighted in the second book was the relationship between Allison and her mother. There's a lot of care and love and understanding between Allison and her mother, which was very different from the first book, and I really appreciated that. So I would give a half of Cowrie Shell for characters because I think more could have been explored with some of the secondary characters in the story. The third Cowrie Shell is about point of view, and as I mentioned, this story was written from the point of view of a few characters. The main one is Allison. We also have several chapters written from the point of view of Hatta, who's the Mad Hatter, if you haven't guessed. And then we also have a couple of chapters that are written from the point of view of the Black Knight. And so that gives us, and it's through the Black Knight's perspective that we learn more about this war and more about the villain and what was done to the people who tried to rise up against this villain. My Cowrie Shell system is designed to look at how systems of power are critiqued in the stories that I read. And so the question that's most important for me when I'm talking about the point of view in a story is, was the story told from the perspective of the most marginalized person? And what do we learn from the point of view, right? From the main point of view. So power and courage and believing in your ability to rise up against a system that's been designed to destroy you, that's a very powerful theme in this story, which I'll get to in a second. But we get to encounter that theme through Allison, right? She's dealing with a lot of unknowns. She doesn't even fully know her power. She doesn't get to learn very much about her power. She has to learn by doing. And that's the reality for Black folks, Black queer folks, Black girls. And because the story is told from her perspective, we really get to engage with the hero's journey from the perspective of a young Black girl. I really liked that. Allison she's cheeky, she's courageous, she is alive and vibrant, and I enjoyed her. People say that this is kind of like Alice in Wonderland meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and there are some Buffy qualities to Allison. She is a slayer, she's badass, she wears cute clothes and like kicks ass, so she's definitely like got that. But it's just there's so much more to her perspective that we get to see that I really enjoyed. In terms of, a full Cowrie Shell for point of view. The next Cowrie Shell is about themes. What's the underlying message that the writer wants us to get to? And as I said earlier, I think one of the main themes is that it is possible when you have no roadmap to find a way to rise up against oppressive forces. Another theme is the importance of working with other people and stepping in when you can use the power that you have towards an important goal, and also stepping back when it's necessary. There's also a really interesting theme about there's an interesting question about who the chosen one is. In a lot of fantasy stories where you've got this strong hero narrative, you've got this character that is told that they are the one and they are there to save the world, or or save people. And here, obviously, Allison is the one, but she is a part of a group of very, very powerful people, and some some of the characters that don't have the same kind of power that she does are still able to play a very important role. And I really liked that. So her best friend, for example, saves the day, right? Like, she has a particular kind of power that she's able to use that helps Allison do what she has to do. And I enjoyed seeing the power of friendship and the power of family, the power of memory, right? Being courageous through loss. Just a lot of really interesting and relevant themes. The next cowrie shell is options, and here what I'm looking at is, you know, does the main character, as we get to the climax of the story, does the main character have to choose a path from a variety of other paths? And I think that she does. And I don't want to get too much into this because there's obviously going to be a third book, and I don't want to talk too much about the actual choice that she has to make. But she gets to, my favorite part of the story is has to do with one of the otherworldly elements, which is that in the second story, Allison encounters herself. She encounters a reflection of her. So she's looking in a mirror and someone is talking to her, and the someone looks like her and sounds like her, but is not her. And so one of the mysterious questions throughout the story is, who is this person who's showing up in these reflective services who looks like me? Who is that? And that, for me, was one of the most interesting characters, interesting subplots, and also it's that subplot that gives rise to this question about what Allison will actually choose, because she has to make a choice about how she engages with this reflection of herself, and she does make that choice. And I really enjoyed watching that choice come into being. It was really sweet. And if this were a movie, I probably would have cried. So full cowrie shell for options. The second last cowrie shell is otherworldly elements, and that's really where I'm talking about how cool the magical system is. I explained the villains. So we've got this evil woman, we've got these nightmares. We also have this weird like substance that can like go into the body of a person and make the person act strange and make them evil. So that was kind of interesting. There's a lot of like violent swordplay, killing and stabbing and stuff like that. So it's like, it's very much like Buffy in that way. But we really got to see the power of this substance take over the body of good people, and the struggle that people under the influence of this substance like went through to kind of like regain control of their own thoughts and minds. And I thought that was kind of cool. I love Alice in Wonderland. I love the magical system of the originally created world. So I loved everything that I saw. There's like potions and special magical blades and lots of like spell casting and healing baths and shimmery lights and magical creatures and flying things and, you know, just weird fruit. Like it was just all very, you know, ethereal and weird and Wonderland juicy fun. So really cool. So I found that the magical system was really really awesome, and the otherworldly elements were really used by McKinney to get us to think about fear, right, which I think is important. And finally, the last question is, did I enjoy it? I absolutely did. The reading experience was great. I didn't find myself bored at any point. I also will say that I listened to this book and read it at the same time, which meant that I got to hear these wonderful narrators. And if you want to listen to it over audiobooks, there were 3 narrators for the story, and that really helped things move along, and it gave a different spin every time the narrator would change. So it was a really good read. There are a couple things that I'm just gonna flip through this really quickly to see if there's anything else I want to share with you. Yeah, another theme in this story was anger and being able to use your anger as power and not be shamed by it. Yeah, the strength of the Black single mother. That was a really powerful theme. Yeah, I think that's it. I think I actually covered everything that I wanted to share with you. Oh, there's one more thing here. Oh yeah, there's romance. It's very cute and very sweet. So yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that's all I want to share with you about this. Yes, this is the page where good things happen. I really loved that page. Okay, I think that's it. So that is my 7 calorie shell review of A Dream So Dark. I would recommend it. I think you should buy it. If you're a fan of Alice in Wonderland, you will love it. If you are a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you will love it. And that is all. Anyway, if you have watched this all the way to the end, please, I think a playing card, like if you have like a spade or a diamond or a heart or a club, yes, let's do playing cards or chess pieces. You can put that in the chess pieces. You can put that in the comments. If you've read A Blade So Black or A Dream So Dark, please let me know what you thought of the story. Hope that you enjoyed this review. There we are. I'll see you next time. And thanks for watching. Remember to read with purpose. Bye, guys.